Much appreciated. We'll put it out to council questions. And start here.
Sure. Thank you. I have many questions this evening. One thing, in your presentation, you made a comment that the project was brought back to the city, this realignment. When was that? For the realignment onto Park Avenue, the idea?
Sorry, I'll just clarify that. So this is the first time the Park Avenue alignment is being discussed at City Council. This is a relatively new suggestion by the project team. So that has not been presented to council before.
What city staff? Sorry, the city staff.
Oh,
2024, I think is what you said.
So the idea first came about in June of 2024, and we started looking into, so the value analysis effort was conducted by RTC's consultant team. And we were given the results of that in, I think, June of 2024. And then it took the project team, a different set of consultants, several months to analyze and understand what was being proposed as part of the value analysis. And it was after that point in time in the fall of 2024 that we began to have discussions about the Park Avenue alignment with the internal consultant team at the county and RTC level, and also with city staff.
And just while we have you up here, I was going to ask Councilmember Pedersen, since he's our RTC rep, to kind of give an overview maybe from the last RTC meeting, so the public could have an update from the last RTC meeting. Could you give us a brief overview of what that was?
I think I'm going to hand that over to Grace, who works for the RTC.
Okay, thank you.
And good evening, Grace Blakesley, Senior Transportation Planner at the RTC. I was not in attendance at the last RTC meeting, but we did not have a specific item on the Coastal Rail Trail. We will agendize this item for our March 20th meeting, but our Executive Director is here if you have specific questions about the discussion at the February RTC meeting.
I guess I might get into, I've heard talk about budget analysis maybe being brought to that meeting. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, which budget?
That there be some budget on what the rail trail projected cost. Is that slated to be brought back on the May 20th meeting? Yes. March 20th, sorry.
We were not directed at the February meeting to bring information back, but we often do bring an analysis of our Measure D revenues and implications of cost estimates for the Coastal Rail Trail projects to the RTC. Our most recent presentation to the RTC on the Coastal Rail Trail project budgets was in October, and we provided estimates related to the value engineering analysis. But that is something we can respond to any questions about. We've looked at different scenarios for funding our Coastal Rail Trail projects, and that is one of the reasons that our commission directed us to look at cost reduction strategies, because the costs exceed what were originally estimated.
Yeah, I heard the understanding that there was going to be a budget update on the project that was coming out in Q1 or Q2 of this year overall. So if that is something that is a request from the City of Capitola Council, we can certainly continue to provide you on updates. It's something that we're apprised of constantly, and we can bring that as time allows. Perfect. So I just thought it was important, since everybody's here tonight and all the 230 emails, maybe if we just go over a couple of bullet points and maybe just get clarification if any of those are not clear, or if they're misspoken. Just about Measure L, it was passed in 2018, and I think the main goal was, and I think that Director Khan highlighted, with the safety of pedestrians and also for bikes, and that everything was going to be housed on the corridor, and that Measure L was put out to a vote. Is that correct?
I can answer the question. It was put out to a vote. The other points, I need them repeated maybe.
I was just trying to highlight the key parts of what Measure L, the intent was behind it.
Yeah, I can read you the purpose in the ordinance. I think that's the best I could do.
I'm just looking at trying to educate the community.
Yeah, the city didn't put the measure on the ballot, so we don't know what the intent was of the folks who put the measure on the ballot. We can certainly read what was codified in the ballot measure, which is the purpose section in the city's muni code.
Folks, can you please keep it down? Everybody's got a lot of comments to make today. We've got some important stuff to do, so we need to all be able to hear. Thank you.
Would you like us to do that?
just thought a summary, if you wouldn't mind, just as a refresher for everybody.
So the purpose as listed in the Citizens Initiative that was approved in the ballot is, it is the purpose of this chapter to improve safety and reduce traffic by keeping the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail in the Santa Cruz Branch Trail Line corridor within the city of Capitola while protecting Capitola Trestle.
All right, and then just, I guess, some highlights. There was a challenge by the city to have that ballot measure not put on the ballot. Is that correct?
It is. Yes, that's correct.
And that a judge ruled that not in either way, but just that it could stay on the ballot. Is that correct?
That's right. The judge didn't rule on the substance of the challenge. The judge, like judges often do, rejected the challenge on the grounds that it was brought essentially before the measure was put on the ballot. Judges generally reject pre-election challenges.
And the downside to that ruling was that they didn't find it favor the city, so that the city was responsible for those legal costs at that time.
I wasn't the city attorney, but I assume that's correct.
That is correct.
And then wasn't it also reviewed by the Coastal Commission at the time? They didn't have objection to it going on the ballot?
We received a letter from a staff person at the Coastal Commission, but not the commission itself.
All right, and I apologize. These are just, I just think it's good for, since we have everybody here, to make sure we go over these. So, and then that measure passed by 2,526 votes. I think that was about 200 plus or minus over the whole, that it passed successfully. I think 52.8% or something like that. And then also that the highlight, I think, in that ordinance was that the language states that it can only be overturned by the will of the people. It's like, I think that was the final thing.
I think that's in the ordinance, but that's also true of any ordinance. Anything that's put on the ballot by initiative can only be changed by initiative or by the council putting something on the ballot.
And then I think it was important then to maybe review Measure D at the same time so that everybody's on the same page, because it was a very confusing measure, even just for myself, understanding what a yes meant and what a no meant. It was very confusing. So with Measure D in 2022, a yes meant that you want a trail only, and with a trail, and then you want a trail with the option to have a train at a later date or rail at a later date, if I think I'm correct on that. And a no meant that you wanted to have a rail trail corridor.
I think that's open to interpretation. We've heard many interpretations of what Measure D from 2022 did and didn't mean. So I'm also not here to interpret what the results meant. But what it did do was change language in the general plan to remove reference to using the corridor for future rail passenger purposes.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification. And Measure D was, I think, I clarified as a project. Let's see. So with the Measure D votes, so Measure D failed, and so that was a Measure D votes, which meant that it was referred to as ultimate rail. And I think the no votes on that were 2,044 no votes. And so the rail and trail corridor, I think, was spoken by the community overall, by Santa Cruz County. I guess the number I highlighted was just the 2,044. That was the votes of Capitola. I think that was just from a background part. I wanted to make sure that I understood those things properly. With the proposed new park pathway being on city property, there will be some new sidewalk. There will have to be sidewalk adjustments. I understand where there's some existing sidewalks right now.
That is correct. We have deficient sidewalks along parts of Park Avenue for ADA purposes, and also that the substructure is failing. This will be replaced.
All right, and then in the illustration that we had, I didn't see any illustration on how the park, if the new proposed alignment of the trail, how does that interact at Monterey specifically? I didn't see that highlighted.
And pulling up the presentation again. Try and give you the slide number. It is, should be slide 22. Unless that starts from staff's. Okay, so we'll have to fast forward. Keep going. Is it? Keep going. One more, I think. Yep. Keep going. Right there. Yep. Go back one, please. So I'll just note right now that this is all in preliminary design phase. So we're moving very quickly right now to try to get some resolution on where to or how the Park Avenue alignment may work before we get into more detailed design. But you can see there on the left side of the screen, there's a proposed larger sort of paved area that provides better ADA accessibility to the two crosswalks that come in at the corner. And that's because of the angle that Monterey intersects Park Avenue with, as opposed to a 90-degree angle. The crosswalk comes in at a slight angle there and makes for a greater distance between the two curb ramps that serve ADA access to the crosswalk. So you can sort of see that larger plaza area there that's proposed as part of the project.
So it ends at those crosswalk areas, and then a cyclist or a pedestrian would make a decision on which crosswalk they want to go to continue on their path of travel.
Correct. Yes.
A couple of questions just as we look at this, and I know tonight we're just talking about the Park Avenue thing, but you referred to, I think it's like the ZERP report that's working on, and you said we could talk a little bit about that, just looking at overall. When I've looked at that, it seems like it has a lot of effect on Capitola as a whole. And I was looking through on the streets that it looks like it was affecting was 38th Avenue, Bromer, J Street, Cliff to the Village, Capitola Avenue, Monterey, and Park Avenue. Those would look like those would be the city streets that would have some impact. I think just the ZERF grant was just on the 38th, Bromer, and J Street, and maybe the part of Cliff. Is that correct?
Are you referring to the RTC's zero emission passenger rail and trail?
Yeah, project? I think it was, acronym was like.
Yeah, this is ZEPRT, I think it's what called. Yeah. So I'm going to let Grace answer that question. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. RTC is actively involved in developing a concept report for zero emission passenger rail and trail. We have different ways of calling it ZEPRT, ZERPRT, what depended on it was, so we have a lot of fun with that. But it does, the plan is for passenger rail to extend 22 miles from the city of Santa Cruz down to Pajaro, just south of the Pajaro River in the city of Watsonville. So it does extend the length of the city of Capitola. I didn't completely understand what question you had about that particular project, but it does extend all of those areas and those crossings that you mentioned.
Well, there's an illustration that's been presented to the community that shows the diversion of the trail because of those areas, and so that was on. I saw it. It was on 38th, Bromer, Jade. I mean, really, when I kind of was doing some math, it looked like pretty much all of Capitola would be affected by that or this relocation, and the only real part of the rail trail in the corridor was about, I'm guessing about 500 or maybe 600 yards on Cliff. Is that accurate?
That is not what the project team for the Coastal Rail Trail is pursuing. What I think you're referring to is we did look at alternative alignments for the trail when we were looking at the concept report. To try to keep it as simple as possible, when we're looking at the passenger rail project in the area that you're discussing, 38th to 47th, in order to accommodate the clearance for passenger rail within that right-of-way and the trail right now, we would not be able to fit both of the passenger rail as envisioned in the Coastal Rail Trail without additional right-of-way cost or alternative routes. So we asked the community how we should proceed currently with our trail project and passenger rail. And for that section, we are planning to continue to construct the trail, the Coastal Rail Trail within the rail right-of-way. So it would not be diverted in that area.
Okay, so the illustration, like that I've seen on Bromer and Jade, that wouldn't be, or
that is not what we're planning to pursue at this time. But we'll be returning to the Regional Transportation Commission with those options, and that would not be the recommendation from the trail project team.
That's fabulous. Great. And then one last question, I guess, to staff, and then I'll be done. We have heard about some projected project on the Stockton Bridge, and I know there's been some comments made about having that widened for a trail. I mean, for a trail or for bike pedestrian. Is the intent behind the Stockton Bridge? Is it regarding mitigation issues with backup and and the condition of the bridge, or is it regarding having it a wider pathway for a trail or pedestrian?
So in the last state budget cycle, the city received $500,000 sponsored by Senator Laird to investigate and also mitigate debris accumulation on the Stockton Bridge. So there's in-bridge piers where debris historically has gotten caught both on our bridge and previously on upstream bridges that causes flooding. So the money is from the Department of Water Resources for flooding purposes. We did a feasibility study that was presented to the council, I want to say in October of last year. And the recommendation was to pursue replacement of the bridge to have a free span bridge, so to not have those piers where debris could get caught on them. As part of replacing the bridge, we would recommend to do some widening to accommodate bike and pedestrian activity, both for ADA purposes, but just for, it doesn't accommodate the traffic that's on the bridge currently. If you traverse the bridge, you can see that there are quite a bit of conflicts of pedestrians going both ways and also bicycles with vehicular traffic.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And those are all the questions I have at this time.
Thank you. Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was really informative, and I'm so glad to see that as many of you showed up tonight to receive the information as well. I was wondering if we could clarify, you mentioned something about the ATP grant, the funding for that. Does that expire? Is that why this seems to be presented to us so far in advance of now then also having to seek out a separate EIR, not until summer?
The short answer to your question is yes, there are deadlines associated with the grant. And it does seem like it's a long time away, but for a project of this size and magnitude and complexity, it takes a long time to do anything. And so it takes a long time to get through the environmental review process. And the schedule that I showed at my very last slide is basically working backwards from a deadline that we have in the grant to allocate for construction funding of June 30th, 2027. And in order to allocate for construction funding, you have to have completed final design and you have to have your right-of-way certified for the project. And we're expecting that the right-of-way certification is going to be the longest lead item and the critical path. And so to get to a completed right-of-way certification, we need to get to a certain level of design about 18 months prior to that final construction allocation. And to do that, we have to figure out where the trail is going to go and do the environmental review for it. So yes, I understand it does seem like it's a long way away. We have plenty of time, but we're working very furiously to meet that deadline.
Thank you. Then I guess another question would be from Grove Lane down towards Coronado. It does seem like there might possibly be room to have a larger buffer from the actual vehicular traffic and the trail. So I didn't know if there was any thought of where we can utilize space pushing back further from the street, if that's a possibility, if that's been thought about, just because people are worried about safety and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So in option A, so our main goal for that portion of the trail is to keep the edge of the trail within the existing confines of basically the sidewalk where it abuts the coastal side of the roadway, because from that point on, as you know, I'm sure there's a steep slope down to the rail line there. And so to avoid the project having to pay for the expense of putting in retaining walls, we're trying to keep the southern edge of the trail within that existing footprint. So under option A, I believe we're utilizing almost that entire space to maintain the inland bike lane. Under option B, we're within a foot or two of that existing sidewalk edge. So there may be a little bit of room to expand that buffer beyond the wider buffer that option B includes, but that we're being conservative at this early stage of design and not suggesting that. But as we get into final design, there may be some opportunities under option B to expand that buffer, particularly on the sort of western half of that segment, because as you get closer to Coronado, that slope gets closer and closer to the roadway.
Right. Okay. And then also regarding safety, is the curb just like your standard sidewalk curb, or are we talking taller?
No, it's a 6-inch standard curb that you would find along a roadway.
Okay. I think those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Orbach.
Thank you. Thank you to all the staff who presented. That was a great presentation. Can staff reiterate how you came up with these two options and why we're looking at this design change right now?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify what your question is. Are you asking why we got to specifically option A and option B, or why we're looking at the Park Avenue alignment in general?
Both questions.
Okay. Well, starting with the bigger question, why are we looking at Park Avenue alignment in general? The reason for that is there's approximately a $27 or $28 million cost overruns on the project, and so as part of the RTC's direction that it gave in April of 2024, we're looking at all ways to save costs on the project. That's ranged from discussions with Roaring Camp to have them conduct the track relocation required for the project, to changing retaining wall types, and all the way to what are our alignment options along Park Avenue, trying to find ways to bring the cost down so that we can deliver this project on budget. And then specifically on how we got to option A and option B, that was done through coordination with the city staff, thinking about, what does the traffic calming project propose? What are our options for narrowing lane widths? And what are our options for, working with the existing bike lane infrastructure on the roadway, understanding that, the goal with either of the options was to reduce impacts to the windbreak trees along Park Avenue that protect the monarch butterfly habitat, as well as trying to keep the trail as far to the north as possible, as far inland as possible, to avoid both the environmental impacts and the cost of retaining walls. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. What happens if the city council does not take action tonight? What are the risks of not moving forward with this?
Yeah, good question. So I think as Councilmember Morgan asked, it does seem like we're a long way away from deadlines, but given the complexity and the steps needed to move things forward, we are tight on our deadline here. The critical path of the project shows we're just going to barely meet the June 30th, 2027 deadline for construction allocation. And specifically, the next steps after this meeting tonight will be going to the Board of Supervisors on March 11th to request an amendment to the consultant contract to start work on this environmental analysis that would be required for Park Avenue. So if we don't have a decision tonight, we can't go to the board on March 11th to start that whole environmental analysis process. So we'd be looking at a delay to the project. And again, given the size and magnitude and complexity of this project, any sort of delay to the project in a sort of closely coordinated and orchestrated schedule just introduces project risk.
So the risk is there would be no project.
Well, yes. Well, we would be having to request an extension to our grant deadline, and those are not guaranteed.
How much will this cost the city of Capitola?
There is no cost to the city of Capitola.
Okay. So I understand there's a $80,000 budgeted for Park Ave traffic calming for the traffic calming project. Well, what's going to happen to that money?
So assuming that council directs us not to move forward with any improvements on Park Avenue, those are restricted funds, so they could go to any roadway project or bike or pedestrian project in the city.
Great. I think it's really important that we use taxpayer dollars wisely. Can you explain how this may or may not save money for our community, this project?
I can start, I think. So, in terms of the coastal rail trail and the impacts to the project budget, I think you saw in the presentation that the previously approved coastal alignment, there's a lot of very large, very expensive infrastructure required for that alignment. There's 2 viaducts, one along Escalona Gulch and one above the steep slopes above the New Brighton State Beach parking lot. Both of those are some of the more expensive elements of the entire project. And so eliminating both the large retaining wall system and those two viaducts from the coastal alignment and shifting to the Park Avenue alignment is going to save taxpayer dollars for the construction of the rail trail. And then I think part of the, I don't want to speak for city staff, but I think part of the reason why they are supporting the Park Avenue alignment is that it does save the city some costs from not having to implement the traffic calming measures.
Great. And this question is for many of our Trail Now supporters. Will this project bring us a trail sooner than if it was adjacent to the rail tracks?
So there's the question, would the Park Avenue alignment bring
give us a trail
in this
sooner than if it was adjacent to the tracks?
In the coastal alignment? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in the sense that this increases project deliverability because it eliminates some of our budget issues that we've been facing, and money of this magnitude is very hard to come by. I think it certainly increases the risk that we'll be able to deliver the project on time and on budget.
Can we use the funds for the Coastal Rail Trail project and use it for a trail-only project?
In terms of implementing the interim trail? Mm-hmm. So there's a whole slew of actions that would be needed to move forward with the interim trail. I think the first and the largest would be that the RTC would have to vote to rail bank the corridor. And then my understanding of that whole process is there's has not been to this date the political will to vote to rail bank the corridor on the commission. And want to answer any more? Yeah, okay.
Do you know the cost difference between option A and option B?
We don't yet. As I mentioned before, we're still very early in the design process, moving quickly to try to get some resolution here. So we don't have cost estimates for either of those two options.
Thank you. And this question is for our staff. Considering how much this project costs, how realistic would it be for the city to budget a project of this scale? Can we afford this, to do this on our own?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I think the reality is that when we've implemented projects at this scale historically, and I would reference the Capitola Branch Library, the wharf renovation, the community center project, which is going to construction now, those projects have all entailed either a special tax or tax that the voters approved, or alternatively large chunks of federal funding. So I think the simple answer that I would give is without a special tax or a large chunk of state or federal funding, it's not very feasible to imagine that the city of Capitola could save up to do a project like this. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. And does this project support our goals and policies as outlined in our city's general plan, bicycle plan, climate action plan, and regional transportation plan?
I think a lot of different plans the city has developed over the years talk about encouraging active transportation. So in that sense, I do think that this project is consistent with the goals of encouraging active transportation. I don't have off the top of my head all of the policies and goals in each one of those different plans memorized, but I think generally speaking, we have identified supporting bike and ped traffic as a goal, and this would be building a bike and ped trail.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. It's almost 7:30. We're going to get to public comment next, but I think we're going to take a 3-minute break.
Joe, I have one additional question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Could you just, one question about what the cost is to the city for the Park Avenue adjustment? You said there's zero cost to the city. What's the cost for the ultimate trail to the city of Capitola?
Also zero.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be on a quick recess.